Hello. The purpose of this tutorial is to show you how to take a photograph or a raster image and break it up, cut it up, bring it over into Flash where you will be able to animate it with independent parts. So that's what we're going to do. I'm using CS6, Photoshop, and Flash CS6 as well. So what I have here is a JPEG from a photo I've taken. This was at Universal Studios in Orlando, the Islands of Adventure. They have a Dr. Seuss land, and I thought that this sign here might be a cool thing to animate. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to break this up. So I have to make some selections here to get the parts that I want to use to animate. So there's a lot of different ways. I really like the quick selection tool recently because that often can let you select things. Just a note, so you'll see this brush down here, and you can change the size of that by hitting the left and right bracket keys that are just above your enter or return key. And what you can do is you can click, and what it does is tries to figure out, here we go, what your selection is. And as you roll over areas, it kind of fills it in. Now it can go too far sometimes, and we'll probably have that at some point. That's not too bad. It's a little bumpy on the bottom. I'm going to square that off. I think to do that, whoops, I went too far with my selection. I'll have to start over there. Let's see. So select this area. To erase the selection is the little marching ants there. You can hold the Alt or Option key. If you have a Mac, it'll be Option. And you get a little negative sign on the brush. I think just so I don't take forever doing this tutorial, I'm not going to be super perfectionist about this, but you can make your selection nice and sharp depending on what image you're using. So what I'm going to do is I want this, what I've selected, to be its own layer so that it can be independent. I'm going to do that by, on a Mac it would be Command J, on a PC it would be Control J. And you'll see that it's created a new layer here. I'm going to hide my background layer just to show you what I've done. And so basically I have a layer that just has this part here. So I'm going to go ahead and do this for some other parts. So I'm going to quick select this little bottom spoke here, and we'll see how this goes. See, I've gone a little too far there. Whoops. Here we go. Oh, make sure you switch back to the background layer. I have some little problems there. So, quick selection tool, and I'm going to get this little bottom spoke, and I'll hit the Alt key to kind of subtract away that part I don't need. That looks pretty good. I'm going to hit Command J, which will make a new layer of that. It might be a good idea to name these bottom spoke, just so we'll get a bunch of them and we want to know what's what. And we'll call this the base. So I'm going to skip ahead here. I'm just going to go ahead and do this and pause the movie and then basically follow the same procedure here. Just a moment. Okay, so I've gone ahead and created several more layers here of the different spots. Now, if you do this correctly, you should be able to erase your background layer here, and, or not erase it, but hide it there. And so this is what I have left, and this is made up of the different parts. So there's the base. You know, we got the different spokes, I'm calling them here. We sort of have the sign bottom, and then I have the sign all kind of as one object there. So the next step what we want to do is we want to save out all these different parts to individual images. One thing I didn't mention at the start of this, you should be careful to size your photos before you start cutting them up. So if you're a Flash movie, you want the image to be similar in the image size, or as the image size that you're going to use in the Flash movie. So if your Flash movie is going to be say 600 pixels tall, none of these photos in here needs to be any bigger than that. You don't want to import an image that is bigger than what you use in Flash, because that will you'll just be scaling it down, but your imported image into the Flash file is still big, and that will make your SWF file bigger. So you can look in your Photoshop and look at image size, image size, and you can see. So this is 600 wide, 800 tall, and that's about the size of my Flash movie. You know, at least close to about what dimensions I want this to be there, so I'm good. So what we'll do next then is we'll take each part, and there might be some faster way to do this, but this is probably how I would do it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the crop tool, and this is important. Sometimes I see people will save out all these individual images as full-size images like that. That would be incorrect. What you want to do is crop the image as tightly as possible to just that image. We don't want to import an image that's any bigger than that. So I'm going to do a crop. Then I'm going to go to File, Save, and I'm going to save it as a PNG, which will have transparency, and I apologize, it's off the screen. It's right under Pixar there, PNG. You'll see the extension change. And this was my base, so I'll just call it base.png, and I'll hit save. None and none on this is fine, and you'll want to make sure your background has that checkerboard, because that means it'll be transparent. So I have the base saved out. I can look at the file here and see we just have our base on its own. But what I need to actually go back, so I'm gonna undo. Oops, let's see, Photoshop, edit, step backwards. You can do a shortcut key for this as well, which is Command Alt Z on a Mac, or Control Alt Z on, or Command Option Z on a Mac, Control Alt Z on a PC, and that will go back multiple undos. And basically what I want to get to is to where it's not cropped anymore. So I'm back to that point, and then I can make my bottom of my sign here visible. I can hide the base, and I will draw the crop box just around this part. Hit enter, then do File, Save As, change it to PNG again, and we'll call this the sign bottom. Just keep it the same as my layers, and hit save. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the movie again and repeat this process for the rest of the images. So now I've done all that, and I have these different PNGs. When you save those PNGs, I also should have mentioned that you can use Save for Web if you prefer that dialog box in Photoshop. Also note that you can really do this for almost any kind of raster or photo type image. So if you had a picture of a person, for instance, you could cut out different body parts from them this way and break up the parts into movable animations. Because if you just take a picture of someone and bring it straight over to Flash without breaking up the parts, you really have no way of animating that very well. So here's my different parts in my Finder window here. And so now I can go over to Flash and import those. So what I'm going to do is I have a new movie set up and open, nothing going on in here yet. As I mentioned in the properties, the movie is 1024 by 768, so it's about the size I was thinking. So I'm going to go to File, Import, and I'm going to import to the library because I'm just going to bring it all over there all at once. So I'm going to import to library. I'll get my dialog of my files. I'm going to find those files. I'm going to shift select them all. So click the top one, hold shift, click the bottom one to get them all. Hit open. And if I jump over to the library, you'll see all those parts are now in the library. Again, I did my selections kind of rough just so I can do this tutorial a little bit faster and get to showing you. You'll probably want to spend a little more time in Photoshop, getting those selections to be perfect. Now, I want to show you one thing first with these bitmap images. If I drag it over to the stage, if it's about the right size that you want, you shouldn't have to rescale it, and that's really what we're shooting for. But you might notice by looking at this that some of the lines around the text and things is a little bit grainy. And what you want to do is actually, for each one of these images, you want to right click, go to properties, and you kind of see a blow up view here. What you want to do is click allow smoothing, and watch this stage over here when I click this. See, that is significantly smoother. Now that slows down the processing on the Flash Swift a little bit more, but it looks much better, and especially when it animates, it won't always look very good when you're working with bitmaps. Now this is just for bitmaps or rasters or images. This isn't something you would do to a vector or other symbol. So I'm going to hit OK with that, and I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of these. Okay, so I paused the movie and went ahead and did all that for each item. So I'm going to take this item on the stage and delete it because I want to kind of start with a symbol. I'm going to put this whole sign that I'm going to be able to animate inside of a symbol. I'm going to use a graphic symbol, which anytime you have nested animation, it's usually, if you don't need the properties of a movie clip like filters or being able to use ActionScript on it, usually a graphic symbol is your best option for animation. So I'm going to insert new symbol, and I'm going to pick graphic, and I'm going to call this animated sign, and hit OK. And now I'm inside of that symbol. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create layers for each of these objects. The objects typically will animate independently, so to do that with tweens, it is best to create separate layers. And it depends on what you do, if you would do this or not, but for the most part, a lot of times you'll want the different pieces on their own layers. So I'll just finish that here. We have sign bottom and sign. And then I'm going to make sure I have the layer that I want, and then I'm just going to drag out the graphics. And I might have to rearrange these, but let's see what we have. Sign bottom was down here. Whoops, I didn't change layers, so let me cut and paste this. So I just use the shortcut key to cut, Controller Command X. You could also use edit cut or edit paste. Change to sign bottom, and then I'm going to do like an edit paste in place, and that'll put it right back where it was. So switch to top spoke. I'll do it right this time. Drag that over. Switch to middle spoke. I'll drag that one over. Switch to bottom spoke. Drag that one over. And let me change the zoom here a little bit to fit more of it on screen. I just held the space bar there. That lets you move your stage around easily. And then our base, I'm going to drag that over. So now I can kind of use my arrow keys and my mouse, and I can get all these lined up nicely how I want it. It's pretty close to what I wanted, so that's good. And I am pretty happy with that. So the next step, which we actually talk a little bit more about later, is setting transformation points for these objects. Oh, actually, the first thing we need to do is turn all of these objects into symbols. Right now, they're just the graphics. We want them to be symbols so we can actually animate them. So for each one of these, I need to right-click on the object. Let me do the sign first. And I'm going to convert to symbol. I'm going to make this a graphic, and I'm going to call this sign. Usually you can't name symbols the same, but all these have the .png on the back of them, so I can just call it sign. And now you can see that symbol over here. I've got the bottom one, so I'm going to pause the movie and do this for the rest of these. So now you see I have all these symbols over here. I did that. What I'm going to do is, I like organization over here in the library, so I'm going to create folders. So this top one, I'm going to maybe say sign PNGs, and I'm going to just command or control click all those different PNG images and just drag those in there. And I could also make a folder for my sign. I didn't like that I used that name already. I could say animated sign folder maybe instead. And I'm just going to drag all of those parts of the sign into that. So there we go, a little bit more organized. So now that these are all symbols, we can actually apply motion tweens to do rotations and things like that. And what I was starting to say is that you now can give them transformation points, and that basically says where it will move, rotate, or scale from. The base, I'm not going to really be animating that, so that can stay there. Now this bottom spoke, they have these little points where the animation would occur. So to do the transformation point, you want to select the free transform tool. And you can see now if I just start to rotate, it rotates from the middle. That's the default. It rotates from that little dot in the center. So I'm going to undo that. But what I'm going to do is, if you have the free transformation tool selected, you can grab that dot and put it to where you want your rotation point to be. Now if you have trouble, it's kind of not letting me put it right where I want it. That's because I have snapping on. I'm going to go ahead and just turn off all the snapping options so that it's not trying to figure out where it needs to go. But I can put that right at the exact spot I want it. And now you'll see if I rotate, it's actually rotating from that point. Also from this point, I'll select that one, change the rotation to there. Let's see, this one needs to be moved just a little bit. This one could probably kind of rotate from the base a little bit. Probably not going to do too much with that one. And then the sign, I guess I could kind of rotate it from down here if I was going to turn it or do anything with it. So that's a good step before you kind of start to animate anything. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just run down my timeline here. Let's click on frame 50, and I'm going to hold shift and click on down at the bottommost layer, and that's going to select all these layers at once. I'm going to right click and I'm going to insert a frame. What that does is it's going to fill this whole area with the tween span, is what I call it, and this will let us animate it. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a motion tween for each of these. I'm just right clicking, create motion tween, and you'll see it turn blue. And so now you can see what happens is you can set up these. We'll talk more about motion tweening as well, but you can now animate these to do different things. So let's say I want to just work with one object. We'll keep it simple, and let's say we're going to animate this top thing. I'm going to grab the free transform tool, and let's say we go that way with it. So now as I scrub my timeline, it goes from the starting point there to where I rotated it to. And then after that, it doesn't do anything. We could actually move down the timeline and have it go further, or whatever kind of thing we want to do with it. I'm going to undo those. So let's do a quick animation. Now animating this particular object could get a little complex, so I'm going to keep it fairly simple for now. I might even apply bones to this, which is basically a different technique altogether, but it would possibly be a good option for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move several things at once, and this is going to require us to do a different transformation point. I want to select everything but the base, so I'm going to select everything first. I'm going to hold the shift key and then click the base, and that'll unselect it. And what I want to do is move to the transformation tool, free transform tool, and you'll see that the dot here is in the center, but this is for the center of all of these objects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag this one down to this point here. So now when I do the transform, it's going to get that whole group together. So I'm going to move this whole group down like this, and you'll see where I was at in my timeline, that keyframes popped up for all of these objects. I'll move down the timeline again, and we'll do something else. So if you watch that animation, that whole group now rotates down. So a little further down the timeline, I'm just going to bring a few of these other parts back. Now one thing you'll notice is if you select all those different objects again, that transformation point of the group resets. So as soon as you click away, you lose that group transformation point. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to grab, let's see if I can grab them all together here. I don't want that one. So this group, free transform tool, I'm going to move the point down to here. Now I can rotate. Now I'm in the timeline where I want to be. I can kind of, whoops, I have to redo it because I clicked off the wrong thing accidentally. Move that point back. So now rotate that whole group down to there. And then I'll move down the timeline, and I'm just going to grab these top things now. Free transform tool, reset that point to there. I'm going to rotate that guy over, and then at the end I'm just going to grab the sign, and we did set that point just by itself, so we can rotate that and bring it back that way. And when you go back to frame 1 and do the whole animation, so we got that whole group, and then we just have those parts move. So you can really very individually rotate and do different things with this part. But the key part of this, the main part of this tutorial isn't really the animation. That's for another tutorial. The main thing I wanted you to learn how to do is take that image in Photoshop, cut it up, and then bring it into Flash as different components that you can then animate and do things with. So I hope you found this helpful.